If your life isn't what you want it to be, the first and most difficult step is admitting that you are responsible for it. This is not an easy thing to accept. It's much more comfortable to blame external forces, your parents, society, bad luck, or even fate. But comfort is not what builds strength. The truth is, regardless of what has happened to you, no one is coming to fix your life for you. It is up to you to take responsibility, to set things right, and to move forward. This is not a burden, it is an opportunity. Because if you are responsible for your life, that means you also have the power to change it. Many people resist this idea because it is painful. It is much easier to believe that the world is against you, that you are a victim of circumstances beyond your control. And yes, sometimes the world is unfair. Some people are born into difficult situations, given fewer opportunities, or face hardships that seem insurmountable. But regardless of where you start, you still have a choice in how you respond. You can either let your past define you, or you can decide to take charge of your future. No matter how much misfortune you have suffered, you still have agency. Taking responsibility means acknowledging that your actions, your habits, and your mindset all play a crucial role in shaping your reality. If you are unhappy with your job, your relationships, your health, or your mental state, you must first ask yourself, what am I doing to contribute to this situation? It is an uncomfortable question because it forces you to look at yourself honestly, but without this self-examination, there is no path forward. You cannot change what you refuse to take ownership of. One of the most common ways people avoid responsibility is by making excuses. They tell themselves, I can't do this because I wasn't given the right opportunities, or I would change, but other people are holding me back. These statements might contain some truth. Life is full of obstacles. But the problem with excuses is that they shift the focus away from what you can do. They allow you to remain passive rather than taking action. If you believe that your situation is entirely someone else's fault, then you have given up control over your own destiny. Taking responsibility does not mean blaming yourself for everything that has gone wrong in your life. It does not mean denying the existence of external challenges or pretending that suffering is always self-inflicted. But it does mean recognizing that regardless of what has happened to you, the only person who can decide what happens next is you. It means asking yourself, what can I do right now to make my situation better? Even if it is something small, even if it is just changing the way you think about your problems, that step forward is crucial. There is power in realizing that you are not helpless. Consider someone who is struggling with their career. They might complain that their boss is unfair, that the job market is tough, that they were not given the right education. But none of these complaints will change their situation. The only thing that will make a difference is taking action, learning new skills, applying for new jobs, improving their work ethic. The moment they stop waiting for someone else to fix things and start taking steps themselves, they reclaim their power. The same applies to personal relationships. It is easy to blame others for conflicts, to assume that if people treated you better, things would be different. But if you find yourself in constant tension with those around you, it is worth considering your own role in those interactions. Are you communicating effectively? Are you holding yourself to the same standards you expect from others? A mentally strong person does not wait for others to change. They focus on improving themselves first. One of the hardest aspects of taking responsibility is accepting that change requires effort. There is no shortcut, no magic solution that will instantly fix everything. It takes time, discipline, and a willingness to endure discomfort. Growth is painful because it requires breaking old habits and confronting harsh truths. But the alternative, remaining stagnant, blaming others, and feeling powerless, is far worse. Some people fear responsibility because it means they no longer have an excuse for failure. If they acknowledge that their choices shape their lives, then they must also face the reality that they have made mistakes. But mistakes are not something to be feared, they are something to learn from. Every failure is an opportunity to grow stronger, to become better. The difference between someone who succeeds and someone who doesn't is not the absence of failure, but the ability to take ownership of failure and use it as a lesson. Taking responsibility also means setting goals and working toward them consistently. A person who has taken control of their life does not drift aimlessly, waiting for things to improve on their own. They create a vision for their future and take deliberate steps to achieve it. They do not allow setbacks to derail them because they understand that progress is not always linear. They keep moving forward, even when it is difficult. Ultimately, responsibility is the foundation of strength. Without it, you are at the mercy of external forces, powerless to change your circumstances. But with it, you become the architect of your own life. It is not an easy path. It requires effort, sacrifice, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. But it is the only path that leads to real growth, real achievement, and real meaning. So ask yourself, what am I avoiding? What excuses am I making? What can I do right now to take responsibility for my life? The moment you stop waiting for someone else to fix things and start taking action yourself, you will discover a truth that is both terrifying and liberating. You are in control. And that means you can change everything. The pursuit of truth is difficult, and because of that, most people avoid it. It is far easier to seek comfort, to surround yourself with ideas that reinforce what you already believe, to avoid challenges that make you question yourself, and to stay within the boundaries of what feels safe. But this is a dangerous path. A person who prioritizes comfort over truth becomes weak, stagnant, and blind to reality. Growth, wisdom, and resilience only come from confronting the truth, no matter how painful it may be. People deceive themselves constantly. They tell themselves lies to justify their failures, to avoid responsibility, and to shield themselves from discomfort. They say things like, "I'm fine the way I am. I don't need to change," or "the reason I'm struggling isn't my fault, it's the world's fault." These are comforting thoughts because they remove the burden of effort, but they are also false. And every lie you tell yourself, no matter how small, weakens you. Truth is not something that comes easily. It must be sought out, fought for, and confronted with courage. It often brings pain before it brings clarity. If you ignore the truth, it does not go away. It waits for you, and when it finally forces itself into your life, it does so in the form of crisis and suffering. Consider a person who ignores the reality of their failing health, continuing with bad habits because change would be too difficult. For a while they live in comfort, pretending everything is fine. But eventually the truth catches up with them in the form of disease, pain, and regret. If they had faced the truth earlier, they might have had a chance to change. This applies to every aspect of life. In relationships, people often choose comfort over truth. They avoid difficult conversations, suppress their true feelings, and allow dysfunction to grow rather than face the reality of their situation. But avoiding conflict does not solve problems. It only allows them to fester until they become unmanageable. If something is broken, pretending it isn't will not fix it. The only way forward is to face reality, no matter how uncomfortable it is. The same is true in personal development. If you refuse to acknowledge your weaknesses, you will never overcome them. People who avoid the truth about their own flaws remain stuck in the same patterns, repeating the same mistakes. It is painful to admit that you are not as competent, disciplined, or intelligent as you would like to be. But until you accept that reality, you cannot improve. The strongest people are not the ones who believe they are perfect. They are the ones who recognize their shortcomings and work tirelessly to correct them. Seeking truth means being willing to challenge your own beliefs. It means being open to the possibility that you might be wrong. This is an incredibly difficult thing to do because people derive comfort from certainty. They want to believe that they already have the answers, that their worldview is correct, and that there is no need for further questioning. But the moment you stop questioning is the moment you stop growing. If you only seek out information that confirms what you already believe, you are not searching for truth, you are searching for validation. And that is not the path of strength. The pursuit of truth also requires intellectual humility. No one has all the answers, and the moment you assume you do, you become blind to reality. The strongest minds are the ones that remain curious, that question their own assumptions, and that seek to understand the world rather than forcing it to conform to their pre-existing beliefs. Truth is often complex, uncomfortable, and difficult to grasp. It does not fit neatly into simple narratives. It requires effort to uncover, and even more effort to accept. Another difficult aspect of seeking truth is that it often requires sacrifice. You may have to let go of relationships that are built on falsehoods. You may have to abandon beliefs that once gave you comfort. You may have to endure hardship, rejection, or even ridicule. But the alternative is far worse. To live in illusion is to live in weakness. The longer you avoid reality, the more vulnerable you become to suffering when the truth inevitably reveals itself. The words you speak and the actions you take shape your life in ways you may not fully realize. Every sentence you utter has an effect, not just on those around you, but on yourself. Every action you take reinforces a pattern, a habit, a way of being in the world. If you do not master your words and actions, they will master you. Without discipline, you become a victim of impulse, a puppet to your emotions and fleeting desires. But with discipline, you gain control over yourself, and with that control comes strength, credibility, and the ability to shape your future. Language is a powerful force. The way you speak influences how others perceive you, but more importantly, it influences how you perceive yourself. If you constantly engage in negative, careless, or dishonest speech, you are not simply expressing yourself, you are reinforcing patterns of thought and behavior. Someone who frequently complains, for example, is not just describing reality, they are training their mind to focus on grievances, to see problems rather than solutions. Over time, this way of speaking becomes a way of thinking, and a way of thinking becomes a way of being. If you speak in a way that is careless, imprecise, or deceitful, you will inevitably create disorder in your own life. Mastering your words begins with honesty. This means more than simply avoiding outright lies. It means refusing to twist the truth to suit your desires, refusing to say things simply to please others, and refusing to remain silent when something important needs to be said. People often lie without even realizing it. They say what they think others want to hear. They exaggerate to gain sympathy or approval. They hide their true opinions to avoid conflict. But every time you distort reality in your speech, you move further away from truth and further away from clarity. If you want to be strong, if you want to be someone whose words matter, you must be precise. You must say what you mean and mean what you say. This does not mean speaking impulsively or without tact. It means choosing your words carefully, ensuring they reflect reality rather than a convenient fiction. When you speak precisely, you bring order to your thoughts. When you speak truthfully, you develop integrity. And when your words align with reality, they become powerful. But words alone are not enough. Your actions must align with them. A person who says one thing and does another weakens themselves. If you make promises you do not keep, you erode your credibility, not just with others, but with yourself. Every time you fail to follow through on your commitments, you reinforce the idea that your word does not matter. And if you do not believe in your own words, why should anyone else? Mastering your actions means practicing discipline. It means doing what you say you will do, even when it is difficult. If you decide to wake up early, then wake up early. If you commit to a goal, then pursue it with full effort. Every time you act with discipline, you build confidence in yourself. You prove that you are capable of controlling your impulses, of delaying gratification, of prioritizing long-term success over short-term comfort. Many people struggle because they allow their emotions to dictate their actions. They act impulsively when they are angry. They abandon their responsibilities when they are tired. They break their commitments when things become difficult. But emotions are fleeting, and if you allow them to control your behavior, you become unreliable, inconsistent, and weak. A strong person does not act based on how they feel in the moment. They act based on principle, on discipline, on what they know is right. Mastering your actions also means taking responsibility for them. If you make a mistake, admit it. If you fail, own it. Do not make excuses. Do not shift blame. Do not pretend that circumstances are at fault when the truth is that you could have done better. Taking responsibility is painful, but it is the only way to grow. The person who refuses to acknowledge their mistakes remains stagnant, while the person who confronts them head-on becomes stronger. Another key to mastering your actions is understanding the weight of small decisions. Every choice you make, no matter how small, sets a precedent. If you skip one workout, it becomes easier to skip the next. If you tell one lie, the next one comes more naturally. If you procrastinate today, tomorrow will be no different. Weakness does not appear all at once. It builds through a series of small compromises. But strength is built in the same way. Every disciplined action reinforces discipline. Every honest word reinforces integrity. Every fulfilled commitment reinforces reliability. If you want to change your life, start by mastering your words and actions. Speak truthfully. Speak carefully. Do not waste words on meaningless complaints or dishonest flattery. Let your words be precise and let them reflect reality. Then act in a way that aligns with your words. Do what you say you will do. Follow through. Be disciplined. Take responsibility for your actions. Over time, this will transform you. You will become someone others trust because your words and actions will be consistent. You will become someone you trust because you will know that when you commit to something, you will follow through. And most importantly, you will gain control over yourself, which is the foundation of all strength. The alternative is chaos. If you do not master your words, they will betray you. If you do not master your actions, they will lead you into disorder. But if you take control of what you say and do, you take control of your life. And that is the path to true strength. Life is inherently chaotic. No matter how much structure you try to impose, disorder will always find a way in. You will experience loss, disappointment, failure, and uncertainty. No one is immune to this. The difference between those who grow stronger and those who collapse under the weight of life's difficulties lies in how they respond. Do they run from chaos, hoping to avoid it for as long as possible? Or do they confront it voluntarily, facing it head-on before it has the chance to consume them? Most people prefer to avoid chaos. They turn away from problems, hoping they will disappear on their own. They refuse to have difficult conversations because they fear conflict. They ignore their responsibilities until the consequences become unbearable. But avoiding chaos does not eliminate it. It only allows it to grow in the shadows. And when it finally emerges, it does so with even greater force, overwhelming those who failed to prepare. The strongest individuals are those who confront chaos voluntarily. They do not wait for life to force them into action. They step forward willingly. They acknowledge that hardship is inevitable, and rather than running from it, they prepare for it. They train themselves to handle discomfort, uncertainty, and difficulty before those things become unavoidable. This is not an easy path, but it is the only one that leads to true strength and resilience. Confronting chaos voluntarily means seeking out challenges rather than avoiding them. It means choosing discipline over comfort, responsibility over passivity, and truth over denial. It is the difference between the person who waits until their health deteriorates before taking action and the person who builds healthy habits long before they are needed. It is the difference between the person who avoids financial problems until they are drowning in debt and the person who takes control of their finances early, no matter how difficult it may be. The longer you wait to face reality, the more painful it becomes. One of the most common ways chaos enters a person's life is through avoidance. People ignore their problems, thinking that if they do not acknowledge them, they will not have to deal with them. But this is never the case. Avoiding a problem does not make it disappear. It only gives it time to grow into something far worse. A small lie becomes a tangled web of deception. A minor argument festers into resentment. A neglected responsibility turns into a crisis. If you want to take control of your life, you must make it a habit to confront problems as soon as they arise. Voluntarily facing chaos also means stepping outside of your comfort zone. Growth does not happen in a place of ease. It happens when you willingly put yourself in situations that challenge you, that stretch your abilities, that force you to confront your weaknesses. If you only do what is safe and familiar, you will never develop the strength needed to handle real adversity. The person who avoids difficulty is fragile, easily broken by life's unpredictability. But the person who regularly pushes themselves beyond their limits becomes resilient. There is a reason people admire those who take on great challenges. The person who willingly subjects themselves to hardship in order to become stronger embodies the highest form of discipline and courage. Think of the individual who wakes up early every day to train their body and mind even when no one is watching. Think of the person who works relentlessly to build something meaningful despite constant setbacks. These individuals do not wait for life to force them into difficulty. They seek it out, knowing that the struggle itself is what shapes them. Confronting chaos also means taking responsibility for the aspects of life that feel overwhelming. Many people feel powerless when faced with disorder, believing that it is something imposed upon them rather than something they have the ability to navigate. But even in the face of immense difficulty, there is always something you can control. No matter how small, that is where you must begin. If your life is in disarray, start by bringing order to one thing. Clean your space, organize your schedule, set a goal, do something, no matter how minor, to assert control over the chaos. Each small act of discipline is a step toward mastery over the disorder in your life. Happiness is fleeting. It comes and goes based on external circumstances, on whether things are going well, whether you are comfortable, whether life is treating you kindly. But meaning is deeper. Meaning is what sustains you when happiness disappears. It is what gives you the strength to endure suffering, to push through difficulty, to keep going even when everything around you feels chaotic and uncertain. If you make happiness your primary goal, you will forever be chasing something that slips through your fingers. But if you build meaning, you will create something lasting, something that gives your life purpose, even in the face of hardship. Many people today are obsessed with happiness. They seek pleasure, comfort, and ease, believing that these things will bring fulfillment. But happiness is not something you can pursue directly. It is a byproduct of living in a way that is meaningful, of striving towards something greater than yourself. When people chase happiness for its own sake, they often end up feeling empty. They distract themselves with entertainment, seek constant validation, or indulge in temporary pleasures, yet they still feel unfulfilled. This is because happiness, when pursued without meaning, lacks depth. A meaningful life, on the other hand, requires effort, responsibility, and sacrifice. It is not always easy. In fact, it often involves suffering, but it is through struggle that we find purpose. Think of the parent who dedicates themselves to raising their child. It is difficult, exhausting, and full of challenges, yet it brings a deep sense of meaning. Think of the artist who pours years into perfecting their craft. The work is grueling, filled with setbacks, but it gives them a reason to wake up every morning. Meaning is not found in ease. It is found in commitment, in responsibility, in striving towards something that matters. One of the biggest mistakes people make is believing that a meaningful life should always be enjoyable. But meaning and comfort do not always go hand in hand. Sometimes doing what is meaningful means enduring pain, making sacrifices, and delaying gratification. The person who wants to build a meaningful career must be willing to work hard, to fail, to persist through obstacles. The person who wants deep relationships must be willing to face difficult conversations, to be vulnerable, to put in the effort required to maintain real connections. A life focused solely on happiness avoids these struggles, but in doing so, it also avoids depth. There is a reason why people who take on great responsibilities often feel more fulfilled than those who seek only pleasure. Responsibility forces you to grow, to push beyond your own immediate desires, to contribute to something greater than yourself. It gives life structure and purpose. A person who takes responsibility for their family, their community, or their own self-improvement will often experience hardship, but they will also experience a deeper sense of meaning than someone who avoids responsibility in favor of short-term enjoyment. Happiness, when it comes, is wonderful, but it cannot be the foundation of your life because it is too fragile. The moment something goes wrong, the happiness disappears, but meaning endures. If you build a life of meaning, you will have something to hold on to even in the darkest times. You will have a reason to keep moving forward, even when happiness is nowhere to be found. One of the dangers of prioritizing happiness is that it often leads to avoidance. People avoid discomfort, avoid difficulty, avoid anything that might challenge them because they believe it will make them unhappy. But avoidance does not lead to strength. It leads to weakness, to fragility, to a life that crumbles under pressure. A meaningful life, on the other hand, embraces challenge. It sees difficulty not as something to run from, but as something to confront head on. If you want to build a meaningful life, you must start by asking yourself, what truly matters? What is worth struggling for? What is worth sacrificing for? These questions are far more important than simply asking, what makes me happy? Because happiness alone is not enough. A life built on meaning is a life that contributes to something beyond personal pleasure. It is a life that creates, that builds, that leaves something behind. Meaning is often found in service to others. The most fulfilled people are not those who spend all their time chasing their own pleasure, but those who give their time, energy, and effort to something greater. A teacher who dedicates their life to shaping young minds. A doctor who works tirelessly to save lives. A mentor who guides others through challenges. These are the people who experience true fulfillment. They do not always feel happy, but they feel that their lives matter. Another key aspect of meaning is growth. A meaningful life is one where you are constantly improving, learning, and pushing yourself to be better. This requires struggle. It requires stepping outside of your comfort zone, requires discipline. If you avoid challenges because they make you uncomfortable, you rob yourself of the opportunity to grow. But if you seek out challenges, if you willingly take on responsibility, endure discomfort, and push yourself beyond your limits, you will build a life that is deeply meaningful. There is nothing wrong with happiness, but it should never be your highest goal. Happiness is a gift, a temporary moment of joy, but meaning is what sustains you. If you chase happiness alone, you will find yourself empty. But if you build a life of meaning, happiness will often follow as a natural consequence. And even when it does not, you will still have something to hold on to, something real, something lasting, something that makes life worth living. Suffering is an unavoidable part of life. No matter who you are, how much you try to protect yourself, or how carefully you plan your future, you will face hardship. You will encounter pain, loss, failure, and disappointment. Many people spend their lives trying to escape suffering, doing everything they can to avoid discomfort. But this approach leads to weakness. The truth is, suffering is not just an obstacle, it is an opportunity. If you embrace suffering instead of running from it, if you face it willingly instead of trying to avoid it, you will transform it into strength. Most people view suffering as something to be eliminated, but this is a mistake. Pain has a purpose. It teaches, it reveals weaknesses, it forces growth. The strongest individuals are not those who have never suffered, but those who have faced suffering and refused to let it destroy them. Every challenge, every hardship, every painful moment is a test. It asks you, Will you break under this pressure, or will you rise above it? People who avoid suffering at all costs become fragile. They become easily overwhelmed, unable to handle even minor difficulties because they have never learned to endure hardship. When you refuse to confront suffering, you do not eliminate it. You simply make yourself weaker in the face of it. Life will inevitably throw difficulties your way, and if you are unprepared, they will crush you. But if you learn to embrace suffering, if you voluntarily face discomfort and hardship, you will develop resilience. This is why people who intentionally challenge themselves grow stronger. The athlete who pushes through grueling training, the entrepreneur who perseveres through countless failures, the student who endures long nights of studying, all of them embrace suffering in order to grow. They do not seek pain for its own sake, but they understand that pain is part of the process. They recognize that every struggle they endure makes them stronger, tougher, and more capable. Suffering is a teacher. It reveals what you are truly made of. When things are easy, you do not know your limits. You do not know how much you can endure, how much strength lies within you. It is only when you are tested, when life pushes you to the edge, that you discover who you really are. Some people crumble under hardship. Others use it as fuel to become better. The difference is not in the suffering itself, but in how you respond to it. There is a choice in suffering. You can let it break you, or you can let it shape you. Many people allow their pain to turn into bitterness, resentment, and despair. They blame the world, they blame others, they sink into self-pity. But this approach leads nowhere. It makes suffering meaningless. The people who grow from suffering are those who accept it, learn from it, and use it to make themselves stronger. One of the most powerful things you can do is to voluntarily embrace suffering before it is forced upon you. This means seeking out challenges that push your limits. It means choosing discipline over comfort, responsibility over ease, effort over stagnation. The person who voluntarily endures hardship is preparing themselves for the inevitable struggles of life. They do not wait for suffering to come to them. They meet it head on their own terms. This is why discipline is so important. When you wake up early to train, when you push through exhaustion to complete a difficult task, when you force yourself to confront uncomfortable truths, you are strengthening yourself. You are proving that you can handle discomfort, that you can endure hardship without falling apart. Over time, this builds an unshakable foundation. When real suffering arrives, as it inevitably will, you will not be overwhelmed. You will already have developed the strength to endure it. Another important aspect of embracing suffering is understanding that it gives life meaning. If everything were easy, if there were no struggle, no hardship, no pain, life would feel empty. The most meaningful experiences in life often come through struggle, the pride of accomplishing something difficult, the deep bonds formed through shared hardship, the wisdom gained through adversity. These are things that cannot be found in a life of pure comfort.